Welcome, everybody. This is a conference organized by Yale's Global Justice Program with co-sponsorship from the NGOs Academics Stand Against Poverty and Incentives for Global Health. In addition, the annual Amartya Sen Essay Prize is co-sponsored by Global Financial Integrity, a think tank in Washington, D.C. The Global Justice Program focuses analytical and normative attention on social structures, especially ones at the supranational level and ones that substantially influence human lives. These structures include institutional arrangements, of course, the familiar topic of John Rawls, mostly codified in laws and treaties, which organize and condition international cooperation on trade, finance, health, environment, and much else. These structures also include social and cultural practices, customs, and habits, which, though often not codified, can be just as real and effective, to which racism and sexism are living examples. A third kind of structures are infrastructure, the physical layout providing access to water, energy, transportation, communications, and so on. And finally, there is the remainder of our physical environment as continually modified by the way human beings interact with it. Our settlements, agriculture, mining, pollution, rivers and canals, parks, forests, coastlines, and so on. All these structures profoundly impact human lives, can mitigate or aggravate violence, oppression, inequality, and poverty. Yet many of them escape normative attention because we pay more attention to the necessary role they play than to their distributive effects. An example that will be central to this conference are rules governing innovation. Innovation is absolutely essential to human progress and essential also to our defense against new threats and challenges such as COVID-19. Because innovation is often difficult, time-consuming, and expensive, we have created rewards for innovation in order to attract excellent minds as well as investment capital. In the contemporary world, the main such rewards are intellectual property rights, such as patents, copyrights, and trademarks, an elaborate reward system that has been globalized in 1995 through the founding treaty of the World Trade Organization, more precisely through Annex 1C of this treaty, which is the so-called TRIPS agreement. A key provision of TRIPS, enshrined in Articles 27.1 and 33, entitles innovators to 20-year product patents on their innovations in WTO jurisdictions, which is to say pretty much the whole world. For the duration of such a patent, the patentee has a temporary monopoly on the manufacture and sale of its innovation in the relevant jurisdiction. Thus protected from competition, innovators can sell their patented product at high markups or charge high licensing fees for rights to manufacture or sell it. Such earnings allow them to recoup their upfront expenses for research and development, patenting, and pursuing regulatory approvals. These fixed costs of innovation plus profits are thus in effect paid for by early buyers of innovative products who buy them while they are still under patent. Patent monopolies provide strong innovation incentives, but they also have three serious drawbacks. First, because monopolists earn their rewards from user-focused decisions, innovative activities are focused on generating benefits for users, while largely ignoring both positive and negative externalities, third-party effects. This leads to substantial underinvestment, for example, in green innovations, whose benefits overwhelmingly go to distant strangers and future generations. It also leads to underinvestment in the development of new pharmaceuticals that, by slashing the incidence of their target disease, would bring large benefits to non-users, but would thereby also slash the innovator's future sales. Second drawback, to maximize their reward, monopolists must balance price and volume, keeping supplies scarce enough to sustain large markups. Consequently, innovations reach poor populations much later or not at all. Each year, millions of people suffer and die from lack of access to advanced medicines that generic manufacturers would be glad to mass produce and sell quite cheaply. Third, patent monopolies fail to encourage innovations addressing the specific needs of poorer people who cannot pay large markups. This effect is again most obvious in the pharmaceutical sector, whose research efforts against specific diseases show a strong correlation with the average income of the corresponding patient population. When the people suffering from a disease are overwhelmingly poor, then this disease gets very little research attention. Now, it may be possible in certain innovative economic sectors to complement patents with a supplementary reward system that offers innovators the option to trade in their monopoly privileges for rewards that are proportional to the actual impact achieved with their innovation. This idea is promising in sectors where innovations can have great social and moral importance that is not adequately reflected in users' willingness to pay, and where there is a uniform standard of social value against which the impact of competing innovations can be assessed. We believe that this includes at least these four important economic sectors. First, pharmaceutical innovations, which could be rewarded according to their health impact. Green innovations, rewarded according to their impact on pollution. Educational innovations, rewarded according to their impact on skills and employment. Agricultural innovations, rewarded according to their impact on nutrient yield and consumption of pesticides, fertilizers, water, and so on. So let me give you a brief example of how something like that could work concretely. So imagine that you had annual pools of money supplied, let's say, and guaranteed into the future by a coalition of willing governments. Governments would make available these pools, let's say in the pharmaceutical sector, something in the order of $5 to $6 billion annually. And innovators with a new pharmaceutical could register to be rewarded from these pools. Each innovation would be entitled to 10 annual reward payments during the first 10 years that it's on the market. And in those 10 years, the pools would be divided up among the registered products according to the health impact that each of them will have achieved in the preceding year. So if a particular innovation has achieved 5% of the health impact of all the registered new pharmaceuticals in a given year, it gets 5% of the reward money. So on that system, you would reward innovators on the basis of impact, but you would impose the condition that they cannot make use of their usual reward, namely mark up the price. They have to sell the product at a no profit price, for example, by licensing it for free to generic producers, or else by selling it at cost without a markup. Now, what this would do is two things. It would first and foremost get rid of one very important impediment to diffusion, namely the higher price that results from the markups that patentees typically impose during the period that their product is under patent. That's a very significant impediment, so it's not unusual in pharmaceuticals to find markups that increase the price of a medicine by a factor of 1,000. So you have a medicine that can be mass produced for $100 a package and is selling for $100,000. We had a hepatitis C drug that came onto the market in 2013, 84-day course of treatment. $84,000 was the price at which Gilead sold that medicine. So we would get rid of that impediment and thereby would greatly support and facilitate the diffusion of the pharmaceutical. But there's one further thing, we would also add a positive incentive. So we would give the pharmaceutical innovator an incentive to actually bring the medicine even to poor people, sell it sometimes below cost, make sure that it is optimally used, make sure that it reaches the remote corners of the earth, because the innovator is rewarded according to the impact. The more good the medicine does in the world, the better it is deployed, and the more widely and effectively it is deployed, the more reward goes to the innovator. So this would be an alternative model. It would be a model where we would pay for the innovation effort through the tax system, through our government contributing to something like the Health Impact Fund, but we would then have the benefit, first and foremost, of getting these same medicines much cheaper, paying less for insurance, paying less at the pharmacy. And we would also have the benefit of avoiding this moral horror of excluding a lot of poor people from the benefit of new medicines that could be mass produced for pennies, but are in fact retailing for prices that put them entirely out of reach of those poor people. Let me say one more thing, perhaps, how this would work in the area of green technologies. So there you can think of a very similar system where you would have pools sponsored by governments, guaranteed into the future, and green innovators would have the option to register any new green innovation for rewards that are proportioned to the reduction in emissions attributable to a particular innovation. Once again, this would bring into view innovations that are not normally lucrative, innovations that are specifically relevant to poor people, and innovations that have very large positive third-party effects that users care little about. So these kinds of innovations would get a special boost. And of course, it would very greatly improve the spread and diffusion of these green innovations, because they would become cheaper and therefore more competitive with the old dirty technologies that people might otherwise want to be using. So there wouldn't be that price markup. And there would in fact be the opposite. There would be potentially a price reduction attributable to the fact that green innovators want to make additional sales because they want to achieve additional green impact. The more they sell, the more their product is used, the more impact it will have on the environment, and the more reward the green innovator can harvest. So green innovations might actually be more advantageous to purchase. They might get a price advantage vis-a-vis dirty old technologies, rather than, as they currently do, a price disadvantage. So here again, in the area of green innovations, I think an impact fund might be a very good complement to the existing patent regime, voluntary, giving innovators the option to register rather than any obligation. This optionality is important because, of course, the patent system is very deeply enshrined in international law and difficult to change. WTO changes require unanimity. And it's also good because politically it makes it much easier to realize that new system. The system can come online very gradually. Countries join the funding coalition, innovators come on board with innovations, register particular innovations. And so Now, on this note, let me make a final point regarding implementation. The proposed impact funds are large agencies with annual budgets in the billions, comparable in size to the World Food Programme and the Global Fund. Because they work with long-term incentives, their funding must be secured for some 15 years into the future, 10 or 15 years. To win government support for such an ambitious undertaking, a significant pilot is essential. With funding from the European Research Council, we've concluded a small pharmaceuticals pilot in India, in Kerala to be precise, focused on data collection for health impact assessment. The next pilot in the pharma sector should be substantially larger and involve real rewards to innovators, showing how they respond to incentives and how much can be achieved with a given pool of reward money. What we are thinking of here is a single reward pool of roughly $100 million raised from a few governments and foundations. We are in talks with the United States Congress and also with some of the parties in Germany that are now forming the new coalition. We also hope that if one of those two key countries comes on board, we can get support also from others, for example, Canada, Italy, South Korea, India, the UK, or the Gates Foundation. Now, $100 million for a pilot, that's not enough to finance the full development of even a single new pharmaceutical. Instead, we would invite innovators to submit proposals of how they might, with one of the existing pharmaceuticals, achieve additional health impact in some selected poor country or region. They might propose, for example, to develop especially for and then to provide in some low-income tropical region a heat-stable or pediatric version of one of their drugs or vaccines, a fixed-dose combination, a new distribution or treatment protocol, or a suitable new diagnostic. An expert committee would select the 4 best proposals based on, inter alia, anticipated incremental health gains, prospects for broad equitable access, especially by the poor, susceptibility to reliable, consistent, and inexpensive health impact assessment, and promise of additional social value. Selected proponents, which might include also non-commercial innovators such as DNDi and the TB Alliance, would then be given 3 years for implementation. At the end of this period, achieved health gains would be assessed according to pre-agreed criteria by an agency like the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation or the German IQWiC, and the reward pool would then be divided proportionately among the participating products. With a successful pilot, an international agreement to establish the Health Impact Fund would become a real possibility. And then, of course, we could go from there to something like the Green Impact Fund for Technology. In addition, the pilot would bring its own substantial health gains and health policy insights. So let's remember here that pharmaceuticals are among humanity's greatest achievements. They've helped attain dramatic improvements in health and longevity, as well as huge cost savings through reduced sick days and hospitalizations. If we add to the existing system the proposed Health Impact Fund, which makes innovations far more accessible to the majority of the human population, poor people, and would also draw a lot of innovator attention to the specific health problems of the poor, then we could make the pharmaceutical sector contribute even much more than it is now contributing, with health gains, moral gains, but also even financial net gains to innovators and the public. Thank you.